listening to the Podcast Advertising Playbook, your resource to better understand and execute successful podcast ad campaigns. Hello and welcome to the Podcast Advertising Playbook. I'm your host, Heather Osgood. Today, I am joined by Jed Baker. He is the former CEO of Starglow and now head of audio at SuperAwesome. Jed, welcome to the program.
Thank you so much for having me, Heather. I'm a big fan.
Well, I'm so excited to dig into all of this. So you are the CEO or past CEO and founder of Starglow. Tell us a little bit about kind of how you came up with the idea of Starglow, what exactly Starglow was and is, and how you got into the space.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, I was a longtime talent agent at United Talent Agency, and technically I was a television literary agent. So I would represent writers and producers and actors, and I would package and sell TV shows. Um, but I think it was about like 2016 when podcasts really started taking off, not just in terms of listenership, but also in terms of a medium that would drive television packages. And so I got really interested in podcasts, and me and Oren Rosenbaum teamed up at UTA to start taking a lot of our clients' IP and turn them into TV shows. So, like Dr. Death, Shrink Next Door, We Crashed, those were all properties that we were taking from podcast world and bringing into television. That was kind of my foray into podcasting. And when the pandemic hit in 2020, 2021, there was like this concerted kind of effort by a lot of the mainstream journalist outlets like Wall Street Journal and New York Times and LA Times and Washington Post saying, hey, parents, we know your kids are locked inside all day and they're going to be on their screens constantly. And if you want an alternative, here are some podcasts that you might not know of to help get your kids off screens and enjoy another form of entertainment. And that was kind of a light bulb moment for me where I was like, oh, wow, like this does seem like a pretty great offering. And parents took heed. And listenership on those kind of core kids and family podcasts absolutely skyrocketed during the pandemic. But I think the most interesting thing was that it never died down. Like once parents
Mhm.
and kids started listening to these podcasts together, it was kind of over. Like they just didn't stop because it was such a phenomenal opportunity and such a great offering. And so the way I saw that was, well, if listenership is skyrocketing, why is monetization not skyrocketing? And as
Mm.
an agent, we had just sold Wondery to Amazon, and I was kind of sitting there thinking, well, I'd like to build an audio network. I know how to do it. But what space am I the most interested in? And it all of a sudden became really obvious. Just kids and family is a really unique space and incredibly under-monetized. And my point of view was that the reason it was under monetized was because people were pointing to kind of boogeymen like the FTC and saying, well, COPPA compliance is an issue. And it's like, I don't really think anyone actually looked into what COPPA actually is because it's really
Mhm.
not an issue.
Mhm.
Um, and I think the core issue that all these places were running into was that it was too fragmented of a marketplace. And the reason I started Starglow was to bring monetization to the kids and family audio space. So I left UTA and started Starglow at the I guess March of 2023. We officially launched in July of 2023. We had raised venture by that point, and we used the money to consolidate the marketplace and really bring scale to one seller.
Mhm.
And it wasn't until, we had 10 million downloads a month that Hasbro would even take our calls.
Mhm.
So I understood what the larger networks and a lot of these, one-off places have been going through this entire time and why they said that kids and family was unmonetizable because no one had enough scale to actually get the big brands to wake up. But once we did, it was a complete game change. And brands like I mentioned Hasbro, Disney, Netflix, Paramount, Moose Toys, Spin Master, Toyota, they all started advertising with us because it's really difficult to reach kids and especially contextually relevant kids
Mhm.
in a COPPA compliant manner. Um, and we were able to offer that. Podcast advertising is inherently incredibly valuable. And this was a channel that until we existed, people just couldn't activate on. And then beyond that, it's the co-listening aspect.
Mhm.
Parents listen alongside their children. So there were brands that wanted to advertise with us specifically to reach our parent audience because it was so concentrated and hyper niche. So like Toyota doesn't really care that our kids are
I was going to
listening.
say they're not looking, yeah, they're not
They
looking to
don't.
reach
They
children.
can care less. But they're really psyched that uh, we have such a concentrated group of parents, and especially high household income parents, that are the household decision makers who influence which car they buy. And they know that parents are a really valuable demographic for them. The same way
Hmm.
that DoorDash and Squarespace advertise with us too.
Hmm. Hmm.
Um, and then to your earlier question, like that was Starglow. And Starglow, we built into the number one podcast network for family in the world. And it got to the point where, we realized that to continue building in this space, we would need more resources. And the equation became, should we raise more money or is this the right time to sell to the right partner? And we had spoken to a few different strategic partners, and SuperAwesome just emerged as like the clear winner in our eyes and the clear company to take what we've done and continue building. And so that's why I'm now the head of audio at SuperAwesome, because they acquired Starglow at the end of 2025, and we are continuing with our mission and just building audio out internally. SuperAwesome is the number one platform for under 18 advertising, and historically they've
Hmm.
advertised across YouTube, gaming, creators. They'll build worlds in Roblox and Minecraft and Fortnite, and now audio is the final arm that they've acquired us to as another channel for them to reach kids and parents under 18.
Hmm. Hmm. That is awesome. Well, I mean, I think that you certainly saw a need in the market, and being able to fulfill that need has obviously gotten you to where you are today. And kudos to Super Awesome for really seeing what you have built and seeing the opportunity in kids audio. And I have long thought, as you did, that part of the issue was really that scalability. And I guess if you're listening right now and you're like, what are you guys talking about? Like, why is kids and family hard? And I guess I just want to kind of set the stage a little bit that I feel like there had been two kind of issues with kids and family content. And one of the things that gets a little confusing sometimes is that like the kids and family genre can mean children's podcasts, but it also can mean parenting podcasts.
Yeah,
And so it's a really big umbrella. And so what we're really talking about today is content that is specifically created for children to listen to, right? And as you mentioned, of course, there's a lot of co-listening that happens because if you're a parent, you get subjected to everything that your child consumes, right? And so, yes, that co listening happens, but we're specifically talking about children's podcasts. And I think that the challenge has been that, there's always been kind of a big question about, does co listening actually happen, right? So, are those parents listening? And so I think that that has been a roadblock that some advertisers have come up against. And then, as you mentioned, COPA compliance, just making sure that all of the rules are being followed and that we're, actually advertising to children in, the correct way. So why don't we start a little bit with the regulations? Because I think
yeah,
you are probably more insightful around regulations than most people are. Tell us a little bit about what COPA compliance is, and how should advertisers take that information and proceed with the appropriate kind of rails in place.
totally. And look, COP compliance at the heart of the issue is around data privacy.
Hmm.
So the reason it exists to begin with is to make sure that no one is collecting too much information on kids, their behaviors, or retargeting them across the web.
Hmm.
So, beyond the fact that podcasts are a pretty comparatively low tech, uh, medium compared to a lot of other I guess, channels out there. Uh, we don't target in that way.
Hmm.
We don't collect data, and we just don't have the IP addresses or enough information on our consumers to do anything that would run afoul of COPPA
Hmm.
or the FTC. So that's the easiest and the quickest, version of us being compliant. We've been a part of the Children's Advertising Review Unit for multiple years now, which is uh, a safe harbor program underneath COPPA. Um, but beyond that, when it really comes down to the ad and ad content, it's really about transparency. So
Mhm,
making sure that we, open ad breaks with and now a word from our sponsors. Um, it seems simple, but think about like Saturday morning cartoons. It's kind of the same sort of idea, which is just making sure that kids know this is an advertisement and not part of the episode itself. We would do this anyway because all of our ads are
mhm,
dynamically inserted, so it just makes it easier for the ad break to exist. But that's really, what we need to be concerned about. And then, of course, we're not running ads that wouldn't make sense for the demographic.
mhm,
There's a million different categories that we don't work in. We're never going to talk about alcohol or firearms or, lottery tickets. It's just stuff like that's more of a logic thing than anything else. But of
mhm,
course, we would never do.
mhm.
Um,
Or maybe even like supplements, right? Like,
yeah. I mean,
I
look, we've
mean,
gotten approached by supplement companies
I'm
quite a
sure
bit.
like maybe like I could see the right kind of supplements, but there are a lot of supplements out there that, might not be appropriate for kids.
Totally. And look, we have pretty strict ad protocols internally,
Mm,
and we have a really clear point of view on what is and isn't appropriate for specific
mhm,
age groups. Um, and then there are things that are a little more complicated, like food and beverage. So, if
mhm,
you're trying to advertise to under 13, what is the nutritional value um, of the offering? And
mhm,
are they, self-attesting compliant? So there are a lot of things that we take into account. Um, and then as it pertains to like our older cohort of shows that we're going to start launching in the next few months, uh, over 13, it gets a lot different. And food and beverage is a lot less regulated. And
mhm,
it's much more okay for XYZ brand to advertise their maybe not as nutritional snack to 13-year-old and above.
mhm,
So again, I think it was really just about us being incredibly knowledgeable and compliant with all the both federal regulations and self-regulations, because a lot of this is self-regulated.
mhm,
Um, but then to your point about like our parents actually listening, I think that's kind of been the most exciting part for me, which is like when I first went into this, it was I think so. It make logically, I think so. But when we started to run a lot of campaigns that were performance based and we really saw the conversion rates skyrocket, and it had to be from the parents. That's
mhm,
when we knew it was really working. So, like, for example, IXL Learning has been a big sponsor for the past, I think, 2.5 years now.
mhm,
Um, and they, have renewed they advertise with us across, I think, 9 of our shows all year round. And they've renewed, time after time after time because the performance actually works. And this is
mhm,
a bottom of the funnel solution. So we work across upper to lower to mid. But IXL and Squarespace and DoorDash, these are all bottom funnel solutions. And they renew with us over and over and over because the parents are actually listening alongside their kids. And not only they're listening, but it's really highly converting.
mhm,
So
mhm.
that's what gets me really excited about the genre.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I just go back to the idea that parents absolutely do listen with their children and there are lots of instances, but you point to the best, which is conversions, right? The conversions are happening and I think that that's one of the elements I always want to point out to potential advertisers is that we have so many direct to consumer brands and so many direct response advertisers that work in the podcast ad space. And the reason that they advertise here is because they are looking for conversions and they are seeing those conversions, right? It's always so interesting when I meet with a new company what brand's perception is about where podcast advertising falls in the funnel, whether it's upper, mid, lower. And I would say that this year probably more than ever I've been hearing like, oh, it's upper funnel, it's upper funnel. And I just want to point back to the last like 15
Yeah,
years and say,
yeah.
are we sure it's upper funnel? Because all of these direct response brands would beg to differ, right? But at the end of the day, it does have a lot to do with conversions. And when you're seeing those conversions, then you know that parents are listening.
Yeah, it makes our lives a million times easier when these things work, right?
Mhm.
And of course, we've had brands in the past where something hasn't converted, and we know that that's not the right brand for our audience. And I will be as transparent as possible with our advertisers and say, look, I'm happy to run this ad. I don't think personally that this is going to truly resonate with our audience. And we've got to the point where we know what they like to listen to. We
Mhm.
know where they will skip an ad and where they won't skip an ad. And so we have all this data and we know what will work and what won't work. So I think that's also been our sell, which is like, if I'm telling you this will work, it probably will. I'll tell you if it won't because there's no point in wasting your resources and our time. Um, but yeah, I love the idea that podcast isn't lower funnel. It's like it's basically what podcasting has been built on for the past 10, 15 years. These
Right.
direct response shops like ARM and Oxford Road and Veritone, who are our huge supporters.
Hmm.
And yes, I think that more and more Fortune 500 companies are starting to wake up and utilize podcasting for upper funnel, but it's still going to be the bread and butter of podcasting that is lower.
Right, right, absolutely. The other thing that I always think is that as a mom myself, I have had so many experiences where my child has come to me and said, like, we absolutely have to go here. We have to buy this thing. And I will say, why? And they will say, because we saw an ad for it, right? Like my son in particular, when we moved to Florida a few years ago, and when we moved, he kept saying, I want to go to Applebee's. I want to go to Applebee's. And I was like, we never go to Applebee's. Like, why would we go to Applebee's? And he's like, they have their shrimp special happening, and we have to go get this special shrimp. And I'm like, and that's just one that sticks with me because he talked about it for so long. And then finally we're like, okay, we'll go to Applebee's, we'll get the shrimp. Like,
Totally.
but like kids hear messages and it resonates with them, I think, in a unique way. And obviously, from a compliance perspective, we're not trying to manipulate our children. We want them to
No.
understand that these are ads. But I mean, I always think like when I was growing up, there was Saturday morning cartoons, right? Which we all watched. And every toy and cereal company, right? They all positioned ads to us that were really entertaining. I mean, the ads were just as entertaining as the cartoons were. And I know you had mentioned that you had to get to 10 million downloads before Hasbro would pay any attention to you, but I guess I've been really surprised. I know that we've done some sizable campaigns with Lego, but I've been really surprised the toy companies haven't spent more in the space. But it sounds like you're really starting to see that happen more.
Yeah, I think it was the second half of last year when everyone really woke up and started spending.
Mm,
And, now every major toy company is spending on
hmm.
kids and family podcasts. And,
Hmm.
we just got back from New York Toy Fair and it was like
Oh,
the talk,
fun.
it was the talk of, the event, which was like everyone tested last year. Everyone wants to go big this year. And
Nice.
everyone's really excited about it because they saw great results. Um, but yeah, I think that toy is a complete, it makes so much sense. And to your point, we make these ads while they are, yes, you know, both for kids and parents, we'll try to find things for the parents that they can latch on to and make them fun and exciting for the kids. They
Mhm.
should be engaging. And the thing that we always talk to and talk about is like talkability and word of mouth. So
Mm.
when we talk to a lot of these toy companies, one of the things that we always talk about is how they interact with their fandoms and how they are either encouraging kids to become bigger fans, come back to the toys, you know, on ramps, off ramps, all that kind of stuff. And Kids and Family Podcast specifically are like an unbelievable channel for word of mouth. It's like 87% of kids share something they learned on a podcast with a family member or friend at school. And that's a
Wow.
huge thing for especially the toy companies because word of mouth is kind of the most important thing you can possibly get in terms of just genuine authentic organic advertising. And
Yeah,
then
that's fascinating.
And then, yeah, like to your other point, kids do influence what their parents buy. I think 87% of parents say that their kids influence their purchasing decisions. And then, yes, some verticals are going to have more influence than others. Toys are like 92%. I think travel 70%. Retail is like 80. And food and beverage, I think, is like 82. I'd have to get back to you on the specifics. But like, it's really high on certain verticals. And those are the ones that make sense for us. Those are the ones I'm transparent about with the advertisers saying like, I know this will convert because kids do have an outsized impact on what their parents actually purchase.
Right, right. Yeah, that's really fascinating. I mean, I think too, as a parent, you want to make your child happy and you're going to buy them birthday gifts and Christmas gifts and you're going to plan vacations, right? You're going to get food for them and take them to restaurants. Like we all want a happy kid, right? Like if we're gonna have to do it, we might as well get them something that they want. And we know that obviously our children are very influenced by all kinds of ad messages that they see. And one of the things that I think is to me so powerful as you kind of started the conversation with is the audio portion of podcasts and um, just the idea that your child can listen to something instead of watching it. And I know that obviously, especially as AI has entered the picture in such a significant way, so many shows are, becoming animated and having a video feature, especially when they're fiction based. And I mean, I think all of that is really fascinating. But I do think that there's just this power of audio and being able to get our kids to listen to something. I crack up. My son has been listening to podcasts. He's 14 now, so he's a little on the older side, but he's been listening to podcasts a ton while he plays video games. And
Yeah.
I'm like, why not? Like, I mean, he's playing the video game already. No need to listen to the repetitive music playing in the video game. Why not listen to a podcast while you're playing? But that it's really fascinating to me that kids have such a strong impact on the buying decisions of their parents.
I also think that too, it's like to your point, and this just goes for podcasts in general, but like
Hmm.
podcasting is a leaning in event, right? Like you're actively listening. And especially in kids and family, these podcasts create really interesting environments for advertising because these families are playing these podcasts to decrease, external stimuli and create these like calm like distraction-free moments where everyone can kind of take a deep breath and you're just as a family listening to something and people aren't doing a million things at once. And that's when these advertisers can enjoy like a real one-to-one moment with their listeners because people are, again, actively listening, they're leaning in, and they're not distracted. It's calm. It's like an
Hmm.
unbelievably rare moment to reach a family in. And I think that's one of the other reasons these work so well. And then beyond that, like, again, this is a podcast specific thing, but trust, our host read ads work unbelievably well because parents consistently rate their kid's favorite podcaster as the most trusted media source in the household. That's unbelievable. So over TV, social media, radio, blogs, parents think that their kid's favorite podcaster is the most trusted source for recommendations. And so that idea of a kid has an outsized impact on what the parent buys. Yeah, it's true. But it really helps when the parent, A, heard the ad at the same time as the kid, so they know where that pestering is coming from. And
Hmm.
B, it's someone that they trust too. This is part of their daily routine. They've opened their home and their car and everything up to these podcasters. So they have an enormous amount of buy-in as well. And when the kid and the parent are on the same page about the media source, and the parent trusts it as well, that pestering isn't as difficult as it would be for something the parent has no buy-in to.
Right, right. No,
Trust is like a
absolutely.
huge part.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Um, so tell me what kind of like metrics or performance indicators do you see advertisers looking at, especially, getting into some of these larger companies like the toy companies? How important are metrics?
Yeah, definitely important. Um, Everything we do, we want to make sure is measured. And a lot of it we can measure based on ad skip rate. Of course, we would only charge someone for an impression that's actually fully listened to, but we know where people are skipping ads, at what points, and how often. So like we can tell how much an ad is resonating on with our audience on a macro level by
Hmm.
what percentage of the ad is being skipped and how much they're engaging with it. Like, is this something that they're actually interested in learning about? So that's a big metric for us. And we definitely see the toy companies and entertainment companies over-indexing on low skip rates as
Hmm.
opposed to like some other, like product services that might not be as relevant to these families' lives. Um, Obviously, brand lift studies are incredibly important, and we've seen pretty incredible results, especially in the toy category for brand lift studies. We ran one at the end of last year that we saw 18x lift in purchase intent for the product and 10x lifts in awareness and brand familiarity. So, like, we know that through those, it works really well. And we're looking to run, you know, performance studies as much as we possibly can because we know it works. So like we're thrilled to run these studies for these brands to get everyone to buy in more into what we're doing because again, it's like we have a product we know works and we'd like to measure it more than just as much as they do. Um, and and then again, we have access to the same level of attribution that most other people do as well. But I'm personally not the biggest fan of promo codes. I don't think that they are an incredibly reliable source for attribution, but we'll do the same thing that everyone else does.
Sure, sure, yeah. So I'm curious, as you are have now kind of entered this larger ecosystem, has that kind of given you the ability to serve brands better being part of Super Awesome?
Yeah, it definitely has. I would say that like A, the idea of a streamlined approach is really appealing to these brands. So when Nike, for instance, advertises, they can advertise with Super Awesome across YouTube, gaming creators, audio, CTV, and it's all streamlined through one source. So they don't have to
Hmm.
ink a million different IOs, track a bunch of different campaigns. They get their post-campaign results, in one place, and it makes it just easier for everyone. So that I think is really appealing to brands. Um, but even beyond that, like we were a startup and we didn't have some of the advanced technological solutions that Super Awesome does.
Okay.
So their version of what they can do on even YouTube audio is much different than what we were able to do. And I think that that's really exciting. Um, I think their level of tech is going to be able to take what we do and really advance the medium. And so look, I think that we are already the number one monetization platform for kids and family, but this just makes it a completely like there's absolutely no competition at this point now. So if you want to reach kids and families in audio, we're by far the best solution, and Super Awesome just took that to the next level.
Sure. Yeah.
But again, I do think it's about measurement. I do think it's about tech, and I do
Hmm.
think it's about all the internal operations that, frankly, we were too lean to have before.
Sure. Yeah. No, absolutely. So one of the questions I had is, do you have any sense of what the average length is of a kid's podcast episode? I know that kind of just in the broader sense of the podcast ecosystem, usually it's between like 30 and 40 minutes is the average podcast length, but I would presume that in kids and family, we're talking more about like maybe a 10 or 15-minute episode.
Yeah,
Do you have any sense of how long episodes usually are?
it really depends on the age of the kid. Um, so for example, like a preschool podcast is going to be a little shorter than a podcast meant for an 8 to 12-year-old.
Sure.
We have an exclusive deal with Nickelodeon where all of their podcasts come through us as well. So like Paw Patrol, Dora the Explorer, and Blue's Clues. And those are going to be shorter than some of our podcasts that are aimed for a older audience. But I think your
Mhm.
general sentiment's probably right. Like 10 to 15 minutes is usually around what preschool is. 4 to 8, maybe we start to get to 20 minutes, and then 8 through 12, we get like 20 to 25 to 30 minutes. But realistically, what we're really programming for is the average ride, like length of a car ride. So we want to make
Mm,
sure that you can listen to one episode or two episodes on the way or back from school, and the average car ride is about 20 minutes.
right.
So that's really what we're optimizing for.
Hmm.
Um,
Hmm.
because I think 78% of our listenership takes place in the car, which
Right.
is, you know, it's a pretty significant amount of
Sure.
listenership. We really have to pay attention to that.
Yeah. Yeah. I know that makes sense. Well, and I brought that up because I guess I'm curious what the content to ad load is. And one of the things that I think is nice about shorter episodes is the ad load also tends to mirror that.
Yeah.
Like, I know, again, every show is going to be different, but what are you seeing in terms of the quantity of ads that are typical in a kid's podcast?
Yeah. I would say that like again, it depends on age, it depends on length, and it
Hmm.
depends on style of content. So for
Hmm.
example, we have a lot of shows that are based on winding down before bedtime. So parents and kids will listen to these shows to calm down before they go to bed. Um, Shows like that, we're only going to include pre-roll ads. We would never
Right.
include mid-roll because the entire point is to get everyone calm and relaxed,
Right.
and we want them to have a positive association with the brand. Don't want to seem like the brand's interrupting them, you know, relaxing before they head off to sleep. Um, so those episodes could be 30 minutes and we'll only run like 2 to 3 minutes of ads at the top. There's other shows that are again more daytime activities. Um, they're probably like 1 to 2 pre-roll, 2 to 3 mid-roll.
Hmm.
But we try to keep a the ads as minimal as possible so that brands have a higher share of voice,
Hmm.
but also so that you know, brands aren't getting like a negative association from these families because it feels like, oh, you're just piling on ads. And it's like, I don't know if you ever listen to like radio anymore, but like sometimes you hear the eighth ad you've heard in that break, you're like, I'm annoyed at this company now. We don't ever want to
Right.
create a scenario where a family's annoyed at a brand. And that's one of the questions we get from brands a lot because
Hmm.
we do want to make sure they have a positive association. So we do like to keep the ad load like semi-minimal, so that they do get the positive association and that they get again, the higher share of voice, which is important for a lot of brands these days.
Right, right. Yeah, which is why I brought it up because I think that that is important to look at. And if you look at other channels, most of the time the ad clutter is significantly higher than podcasts. I think that one of the conversations that's been happening a lot more in this space is, where ads are happening and are there too many ads in podcasts? And I always, of course, have to point to radio, but I mean, TV in any form or YouTube or social media. I mean, I don't know,
Yeah.
everywhere. There are so many ads. And I think that where podcasts do shine is that you tend to have a much lower ad clutter rate in podcasts than you do in other mediums. And so I think that that's important to, to think about as you're considering advertising in kids podcasts in particular.
Yeah, absolutely. And look, again, like I said before, our ad skip rates for the right podcast or for the right products are like incredibly low. So
Mhm.
even though parents have the option to skip, they generally don't. Um,
Right.
and I know that if we had 8 ads per break, we'd be getting incredibly high skip rates.
Yeah.
Um, So yeah, it's like we can tell when it's getting to be too much if people stop, if they start skipping.
Right. Right. For sure. So what would you say are kind of some of the biggest opportunities that you see in podcasting? And that could be in kids and family or just the broader industry in the next 3 to 5 years.
Well, I mean, look, I think the easy answer that everyone's going to give is like, well, the video component is really intriguing and there's a lot there. And yeah, I think that's like incredibly interesting. And I think that
Hmm.
you know, there's a lot that you can do in a visual, medium that you can't do in an audio medium. Um, I do think that people are going to get though back to the roots of like why the audio medium actually really works because the more that we blur the lines between audio and video, it's like, yes, again, I think it's great for marketing. I think it's great for so many things, but go back to when you were listening to Serial back in the day and go back to the reason we all remember MailChimp.
Mhm.
We heard that ad so many times and it just sticks with you. And I would love to hear anybody tell me about an ad that they have seen on TV in the last 10 years that stuck with them in the same way. It's
I
that repetition, increased frequency, and recall. And I do think that brands are going to remember again why they loved advertising and audio in the first place. And I think that this shift to YouTube and video in terms of brand spend, of course, it will be there.
Sure.
But they're going to be advertising on those mediums for the same reason they advertise on YouTube to begin with. An impression's not just an impression. It matters what the channel actually matters. And there are pros and cons to audio and there are pros and cons to YouTube. So I do think that video is being slightly overstated. Um,
Hmm.
I I will also say that I think that there are markets right now that are being, ignored in the audio space, and that
Hmm.
is the teen market. And that is a market that
The
we're really
teen.
excited. Teen.
Yes. I
That's a market that we're
totally agree. There's
really,
like no teen content.
yeah, it's a market that we're really excited about, and we are developing solutions for right now. So this year, we're going to put a big priority on content for teens, and it's definitely different than our sell to advertisers about
Mhm.
co-listening because teens aren't listening with their parents.
No.
Um, but there are a lot of products and a lot of brands that are desperate to reach Gen Alpha and desperate to reach teens, and it's something that we're really excited about. And the configuration of what that looks like, I think, is still evolving because where are teens listening? What format is it? Is it video? Is it audio? That is a real
Hmm.
question. But I do think that this is going to become a really big thing over the next few years, and we're excited to be at the forefront of that specifically.
Hmm.
Um, and yeah, look, I think the biggest takeaway and the most obvious is just that podcasting occupies an enormous amount of you know, people's time, especially in the US, has an outsized amount of attention versus the revenue it receives.
Hmm.
So
Absolutely.
I think the average US citizen spends about 20% of their time when their media consumption is 20% podcast,
Hmm.
but the revenue is only 0.9%.
Hmm.
So like that's going to change. It just absolutely has to. And I'm really excited about that too.
Hmm.
And that's podcast in general, but I do think that that is amplified by kids and parents because I think you're going to start to see that 20% number go up quite a bit for families as screen time becomes a bigger and bigger issue. It's already the number one concern for US parents. And audio will continue to be the solution and really grow in terms of timeshare. So I
Hmm.
think that that revenue will also become, a much larger percentage than it already
Yeah,
is.
I agree. And I mean, this is going to take some time to play out, but I also do think that teens in particular do, I think have a pull toward things that are more analog. They have been raised their entire lives on screens, and I think it's very difficult. I already mentioned I have a 14-year-old, but I have a 17-year-old as well. And they know they spend too much time on screens. They don't want to spend as much time on screens, but it is very addictive, obviously. It's very easy. And my kids we have conversations about how they would like to change that behavior, and having an alternative of something like audio is really powerful. But I think to your point, especially in the teens, like there is not a lot of good audio content for teens. And my kids love to listen to true crime podcasts, which isn't great probably, but like they're very into that. And it would be really cool if there were some true crime podcasts that were more PG, right? Because essentially my teenagers are now listening to adult podcasts because that's what's available. And it's hard because I can't say like, no, you need to listen to Wow in the World, or I mean, like it's not something they're interested in. They're too old for that, obviously. So
Yeah.
yeah, so I think that there's a big need there. So I'm really interested to see what you guys come up with.
Yeah, we're really excited about it, and hopefully we'll have some stuff that we can start to talk about and announce soon. But we have brands coming to us every single day saying we need audio solutions in the teen space.
Hmm.
So the money is there. We just need to make sure the audience is there as well.
Hmm.
We know kids want to listen. We know teens want to listen. We just need the content. And
Yeah.
there are more and more solutions coming in terms of content for that demographic.
Hmm.
But we think the rate should accelerate because it's an incredibly monetizable audience and a really, really big need. So
Hmm.
we're really excited about that. And especially, to your point, like you might age out of WoW in the world. Okay, well, these kids and family podcasts have this market, they have the brand recognition. Start building shows for older audiences as well, so you can make sure that there is opportunities for them within your ecosystem when they start to age out of your primary content.
Right. Right. Yeah, absolutely. Well, Jed, thank you so much for being on the show today. If people are interested in learning more about advertising on your kids and family shows, where is a good place for them to go?
You know, check out SuperAwesome's website, get in touch with us, shoot me a note, and we'd love to chat. Heather, thank you so much for having us. This has been fantastic, and it's always good to catch up.
Yeah, so it's so good to have you. Thank you for being here.
All right, bye.
Thank you for listening. I hope that you have enjoyed this episode as much as I have. I love the kids and family genre. I think it has so much to offer. Really excited to see what they do with the teen genre as well. Thanks for listening and watching, and we will catch you again next time. Thank you for listening to the Podcast Advertising Playbook, your source to a better understanding of the podcast advertising industry.